Hello and welcome to the MLM Lunchtime Leadership Show. It is Monday and we are on to the next principle, but first we're going to tag some people in this. Jeff, I'll let you go do that. Your arms are longer. Hope everybody had a good weekend. It's been very nice here in Indiana.
Rainy.
Today it's rainy, but this weekend was still nice. It's been watering my plants. I haven't had to water my plants each day this week. It's been great. There we go. Alrighty, let's get started. So today we're on the exchange principle, which is instead of putting others in their place, you need to put yourself in others' place. Sometimes when you give someone a piece of your mind, you lose a bit of your own peace of mind. So a question that you want to ask yourself is, do I try to see things from other people's point of view? Most people are selfish and it's about me, me, me. And by the way, it's all about me. So a lot of people like to have a toddler's mentality when dealing with other people. And it seems very basic that we should think about others first, but we're still so bad at it. So it's something that you need to make yourself more conscious of. So the power of perspective. So success can bring many things: power, privilege, fame, and wealth. But no matter what else it brings, with success comes options. So do you use those options? How you use those options reveals your character. So wealthy people can use their resources to benefit others or only themselves, and leaders can make decisions that affect the others positively or negatively. So we naturally do not see ourselves and others from the same perspective. We judge ourselves by what we feel comfortable, capable of doing, while others judge us by what we have already done. So we like to see ourselves in the most positive light, which is okay, so long as you are being honest with yourself and that you are the best that you could be. However, but we also need to view others in the same light. So you always want to look at people with the best intentions and know that they could accomplish something good, because people can feel how you feel about them. And it may not always come across, but sometimes people just get a feeling where they're like, you know what? I just have this really strange feeling that this person does not like me. So if you have somebody like that on your team, you really need to work on that, and you have to ask yourself, what is it about this person that's making me so irritated, so angry? Why is it that I do not like them? Now, there are some people who are just bad people and you don't want to be around them. But if it's somebody where you're like, this person's nice and a lot of other people like them, why am I so irritated by their presence? You need to ask yourself some questions and get down to the root of why it is. And sometimes the issue is, it's something, the person's irritating you because they're doing the stuff that you're not doing, which is what we went over in previous chapters. Hello, Gabby, how are you? So, when we fail to see things from the perspective of others, we fail in our relationships. So most conflicts in our relationships come from our failure to see things from the other person's perspective. And if people made the effort to see things from the other person's point of view, 80% of our relational conflict would disappear, which is very true. So learning to see things from other people's perspective helps us succeed in our relationship. So even though this concept is simple, like I said at the beginning, most people don't do it. And it's just that toddler mentality of me, 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 me. But you need to start asking yourself, what can I start doing for other people? And especially in arguments. This is something that I learned a while back. My whole family will fight to the death if there is an argument. We have a lot of high D and I type personalities in my family. So anytime there's an argument, it is horrible. However, once you're able to step into that other person's shoes, you're able to really understand what they may be getting at. And it doesn't mean that they're wrong. Just because they disagree with you does not mean you are right. But you may be able to see something from another person's perspective and see, okay, I can see why you think that way, but have you ever thought of this? And it's a different way to approach different conversations with people. And this is also where learning personalities helps a lot, because sometimes people say, if you know the person's personality, no matter what they say, you'll understand what they meant. And you don't take it as personally, so it really helps. So, that is basically what I got out of this chapter. Jeff, I'm going to have you take over with how to make the exchange.
Exchange is up here. It ran away.
It ran away?
So instead of putting others in their place, we kind of have to put ourselves in our own place here. Hi, Candy. Hi, Patricia. Saw Bill jumped on here a minute ago. So the question I must ask myself is, do I try to see things from other people's points of view? So there's a couple different ways to do that. Age, location, growing up. Brandy talked a little bit about that. Personalities. Also, what are people going through? What are people going through right now? Because people go through all kinds of terrible things, and you have to kind of check where things are at with how they're reacting. Obviously if somebody just lost somebody, their reactions are going to be all over the place. If they just lost a job, if they, if they're behind on bills, if they're, having an argument with their spouse, all these different things, of course, are going to adjust how they react to you, and you've got to kind of put that in proper perspective against who this person is. Now, if you don't know them at all, maybe you won't know. What I've found is most people don't ask. Most people don't ask where people are at. Most people don't find out what's going on. So therefore, if you don't actually get to know what's going on in a person's life, you're reacting only based on your thoughts, your ideas, your emotions, and you're not even taking the other person into consideration. So what I got out of this is basically you have to take what's going on into consideration. We naturally do not see ourselves from other people's perspective. When we fail to see things from other people's perspective, we basically fail in our relationships. The relationship breaks down. It doesn't work out. Remove 80% of the conflict by seeing things from the other person's point of view. That by itself can help out. So I have conversations with a lot of different people, and right now I think one of the biggest one is, political. I was kind of lucky that I grew up with one side of my family that was ultra left and one side of my family that was ultra right. Now what that did is that gave me perspective. I got to see every single issue every single time from two people's perspectives, and then I was able to make up my own mind. I liked that because at least I was able to see both sides. So when somebody comes at me with whatever issue or argument or what's going on, I can actually take that into consideration and say, okay, I get where you're coming from. And I'll give you a perfect example, and I learned this from a book. And this is also about persuasion. So if you want to persuade somebody from anything, you have to be able to see it from their angle. And if this book was basically sitting in the middle of a field, only it was 20 feet tall, depending on what side of the book you're on, depends on where the shadow is, right? A lot of people describe things from their vantage point, meaning if the sun was over here and it went through the book and you were standing here, you would say, hey, the shadow is over here. But if you were on the opposite side of the book, there'd be no shadow. Same book, same field, same sun. It's from your vantage point of where you're looking at it. What I've also seen is people jump on political sides and take sides on things based on their personality. So it's very, very easy to persuade people in any direction on any subject if you know these things. Now, I say persuade. There's also the aspect of influence. And I like what Tony Robbins talks about. He says all communication is manipulative. All communication is manipulative. It's just, is it manipulation for the good of everybody, or is it for the manipulation and the gain of one, meaning the gain of yourself? So that's kind of what you kind of always have to look at that from that perspective is, are you trying to win an argument, win a conversation, change people's minds? Is it for the good of everybody, or is it just for the good of you and your cause? Learning to see things from other people's perspective helps us succeed in a relationship. We talked about that. How to make the exchange, 4 things to do. Leave your place, visit their place. Basically describing, okay, I kind of see where you would be coming from under these circumstances. So a really good technique to use, and he doesn't even list it here, but I think he did list it in the chapter. Feel, felt, found. Feel, felt, found. This actually comes from the book How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And Dale Carnegie says, anytime you're going to basically have an exchange with somebody, and it's especially if it's a difference of opinion. Dwayne's here. What's up, sir? Especially if it's a difference of opinion, you want to use feel, felt, found. And I was taught this with objections, and I've learned to overcome objections in different ways. The best way is don't get them. I just don't get them. You know, people are like, well, don't you have people tell you, that they just, don't like pyramid things and they don't like this? No, I don't. I don't use any of the words that spark that. I don't contact people using that. So I just don't hear it. I don't hear, well, I just would never have time to, I never hear that. Why? Because I do leads. I don't chase friends and family. So it's just a matter of opinion. It's just how we do it. But I don't get objections. But when you do, and I get objections differently, like people who will get in and then want to go do something else. And I say, hey, look, I had a conversation yesterday with a guy who just got on our team. He's from Puerto Rico. Super cool guy. And he's like, hey, I think I want to do this. I think I want to do this. I think I want to advertise. I'm like, okay, cool. I said, what are you thinking? And he goes, well, I wanted to talk to you before I did it. I said, well, that's probably smart, because I don't want you to spend money, and you don't want to spend money that you don't need to spend. So that totally makes sense. I said, what are you thinking? And he kind of ran through what he was going to do. And I said, well, that's awesome. I know exactly how you feel. I've gotten frustrated too, where it's not moving fast enough. But, I know how you feel. I felt the same way. And here's what I found. I found that I've spent over $100,000 in advertising. So when I describe something to you, it's not just a feeling that I have about what's going on. I've actually spent the money, and what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to save you money. Now, this guy's 20. And he's like, look, I totally respect you. I said, this has nothing to do with age. Like, you can come up with a better idea than I can. I said, but I'm always going to tell you if I've already tried it and I know it doesn't work. Like, because people bring stuff to me all the time, and I'm like, I've tried that. I've spent the money. Now, what I've gotten into habit is I used to try to talk people out of it. Now I'm like, go spend your money and waste it. Mm-hmm. And I'm okay with that. I'm like, if you have the money to burn, try it. And I already know from experience what works and what doesn't. It won't work. It'll burn up. But if you spend the money, now you learn the lesson. And that's how we learn most of our lessons, right? We spend money we shouldn't. We don't listen. We don't do what we're supposed to. We don't follow directions. We try to do it, especially if you're an entrepreneur. If you're an entrepreneur and you're doing that means you're an entrepreneur. You don't follow directions. You don't like, to listen to other people. You don't want to do it their way. You have your way of doing it. But we've all spent that money and lost that money if you're an entrepreneur. So that's just, a matter of fact, what happens. Jim's here. What's up, Tom? So you have to see it from other people's perspective. So have the conversation. I know how you feel. I felt the same way. And what I've found is the following. Craig's here. What's up, sir? And that's how I've been able to have the conversation overcome. John goes on to say, leave your place, visit their place. Do you really know them? Do you know where they're from? Do you know how they grew up? Do you know who they've been around? Do you know what's going on in their life right now? Because all of that can change. Is that David?
Yep.
David, how are you? Also, too, acknowledge that another person has a valid point of view. So you have to acknowledge, okay, that's an interesting... typically, if you see me put something up online, I'll say, this is interesting. Now, this is interesting doesn't mean I believe it. It also doesn't mean I support it. Just means it's interesting.
There we go.
What I end up doing is I'll say, oh, that's interesting, and I'll get all these feedback comment afterwards. I can't believe, I can't this, I can't that. Everybody has a different matter of opinion. Most of the time thinking that I'm either supporting or I'm agreeing with whatever said. But that's what I got in the beginning. Now I don't get that because people are like, I have no idea where you stand on any of this. 3, check your attitude. When you're willing to connect with people, you have to look for similarities. Checking your attitude basically means you need to be level-headed no matter what. Most people get themselves into trouble because they'll fly off the handle, the fuse is lit, they'll overreact to something, and then all of a sudden they have to backpedal. They do something out of emotion, then they have to backpedal, and then they're asking everybody, oh my gosh, do you think this is okay? Should I have done this? Oh my God, maybe I shouldn't have done, maybe I shouldn't have said, maybe I shouldn't have. When you're level-headed, you don't react to stuff, kind of overreact to stuff, so you never really have to worry about how you reacted. You never have to come back and say, oh my gosh, I wish I wouldn't have said. I learned with self-confidence that less needs to be said. A person who always needs to be validated, usually it's a self-esteem issue. Usually. Not always, but a lot of times. It's a self-esteem issue. They always need to be validated. They're always...
There we go. Sorry.
We got people texting, people calling. And you can't block any of that when you're on here, which would have been good too.
Yeah. Anywho.
Where'd it go? So check your attitude. Number 4, ask others what they would do in your situation. Now, it says ask others. Don't ask anyone. Ask somebody who's more level-headed than you are. Because if you overreact and you go to somebody else who overreacts, I've actually seen the other person overreact even more to the issue that they don't even have. Mm-hmm. That's definitely not the person that you want to be, consulting with. And people do this in business and think it's okay, which is really weird. Questions. When you travel, what happens to your perspective? So, first time I go to Brazil, I kind of grew up middle class. We didn't have everything, but we also didn't need anything, right? So I had a bike. If it broke, I was able to get another one. If I, cried, whined, asked a million times, can I? Again, I was persuasive even back then, and I didn't understand how it all worked. I was just persistent. I was persistent instead of persuasive. But I was able to get things done. And I had just kind of a view of how life worked everywhere. And then I went to Brazil. And when I was in Brazil, we were on the beach kind of every day. I spent time with family. This is former family. I spent time with family, and then we went to, we kind of went on a vacation, which was really weird. And we left the city we were in, and we went to the beach, which was like 2 days away. The equivalent of like Indiana driving to Florida, pretty much. And we went to a place called Bahia. And Bahia is one of the poorest states in Brazil. Extreme poverty. And on the way there, kind of got to see a different perspective, extreme poverty. The people, my family that was there, lived very, very well. Everyone was super educated. Schools were all, they had government schools, but nobody wanted to go to the government schools. They had government hospitals. Nobody wanted to go to the government hospital, but they had private everything. So everything they did was private institutions, private schools, private doctors, private everything. So they lived very well. But that was not how 90% of the people lived. And I got this really interesting perspective being on the beach, and these kids would come by every day, and they'd be selling different things. Usually, the one that stopped the most was cheese. They would basically shish kebab, cheese on a stick, and I mean it was like, you know, a big piece. I mean it was like the size of your phone, and they put it on a stick, and they had a coffee can that they had put coals in, and they had punched holes in either side and had kind of like a handle on it, and they would kind of light that up, and they would cook the cheese and then pour molasses and oregano over it, which might sound weird, but it was like at the beach, it just was the best. Anyway, we got into talking, and I was like, so, and of course this was translated because this was before I knew Portuguese, at least to the point where I could hear conversations. I understand, I just can't say anything because my vocabulary is terrible. And this little kid, we basically starts describing. I was like, so, you know, what do you do? How often do you do this? Or how long have you done this is what I asked. I said, how long have you been selling cheese? And they translated, and he's like, you know, and he kind of came back, and they're like, he doesn't know. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was like, well, what is your day? I said, do you do this every day? He's like, no, we work 6 days a week, 7th day, so probably Sunday they have off. But he's like, Sunday I work too. Okay. I was like, well, what do you do? He goes, well, and he described his day. He goes, well, I get up really early. I get up, and it's like I've got to have a 45-minute walk over to the other town that I live by to be able to give them the money to buy the cheese, and then I have to walk back to catch the bus. Then I ride the bus into the city, which is another like hour and a half. I'm like, okay. And he goes, and then we get to the beach, or then we get to the city, and then I have to walk to the beach. So I'd been in the city, and it was a 15-minute walk to the beach from the city. You know, obviously I didn't come from the bus stop. We drove in, but I could kind of do perspective. I was like, okay. So I'm doing the math. I was like, well, what time does usually, he's like, well, we're usually here by 9. So I'm doing the math. I was like, so you have to be getting up by like 6 a.m. to be able to get over there, to be able to do this. And then they walk the beach the whole day. So if you've ever been on a beach, you know, it's hot. Brazil was like, I mean, it was like fire. It was like 90 plus degrees every single day with humidity. So it's kind of like southern Florida a little bit. I've never been to the Keys, but I've been to the Miami area, and Miami humid is awful. So just imagine that 90s, some days it got close to 100. So this kid's walking the beach with his backpack of the cheese, right? He's got it in a container, and he's got all this stuff. And some of you know exactly what I'm talking about because you've either gone to foreign countries or you live in a foreign country. So this kid walks up and down, and the beach kind of winds around. So he walks down to one pier and basically back to the other a couple times. That's how he sells the cheese. Get this. Then at the end of the day, he stops at one of the stands and is able to buy food. I was like, well, do you eat throughout the day? Yeah, we stop at this stand. So then I'm doing the math. I was like, well, what time, you know, well, I catch the bus at 6. It's 6 or 6:30, I can't remember, so long ago. But before that, he stops, and he's like, yeah, we always get this. And they eat moqueca, which is kind of a really cool rice dish with like all different kinds of seafood and shrimp and everything. It was like $1. He goes, we do that, and then I jump back on the bus, and I ride back another hour. Then I have to walk over and give the guy the money, or give the guy the container, so that way they can clean it out and make sure there's cheese the next day, and then I come back. He goes, then I get together with my friends, and I go out and collect bottle caps. And I was like, okay. And he goes, we collect bottle caps, and we collect aluminum cans, so that way we can turn them in for recycling for more money. And we do this 6 days a week. And how long have you been doing it? I don't know. I was like, well, where's your hat at? He goes, wow, I lost it. And we finally found out he was 11. That's how old he was. He was 11 years old. And again, it's just perspective, you know. When I came back, I ended up giving him a hat, and we ended up giving him some money. I mean, to us, it wasn't a lot of money, but to him, it was probably 4 or 5 months of what you normally make. Because they make like $200. It's like minimum wage was like $188 or something, and they made like 3 times the minimum wage. Is kind of what he described. So we gave him like the equivalent of about 4 months income. And we came back, and I would hear people that I was trying to prospect or work with bitch, whine, and cry about, oh, well, life is so hard. You know, my my air conditioner broke and I had to wait an extra hour and this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like, it just gave me this very interesting perspective on seeing things from a totally different point of view. And I got actually angry with people, and I kind of had to check myself that people don't understand because they've never experienced. The majority of the United States, I can't talk for the rest of the world, but the majority of the United States, I just read this article, 80% of people have never left a 50-mile radius of their house. That's as far as they go. That's called the comfort zone, and it made sense to me because I was like, well, yeah. I was like, 69% of the people's basic human instinct is to stay put, to be safe, to be comfortable, and they just never go anywhere. But 80% of the world basically sits in that, in that perspective. So you have to take that into account when you're out recruiting, when you're out networking. I typically find the people who do well inside of direct sales, inside of network marketing, inside of recruiting, are the people who have traveled, are the people who have gotten out of their comfort zone, are the people who have been through traumatic things. Because if you've been through something traumatic, whether that be life or death, whether that be a health scare, whether that be a military thing, because in the military, of course, you travel too, you just don't react the same way to the normal everyday crisis crap that most people overreact to and freak out. So that's kind of what we got for today, is see things from a different point of view, understand and learn personalities. But this is, this is an in-depth look at some of the stuff we actually teach inside of our school. Myself, Bess, Brandy, teach inside of the MLM Millionaire Club. And, although we go over some of the similar stuff, there's always different stories. And there's always different stories because we're always out recruiting and doing what we're talking about and succeeding. So if that is what you're interested in, please get with us, ask us questions. We'll get you some information on that if that's something you're interested in. If not, we appreciate everybody else for being on. And tomorrow we're going over the next chapter.
All right. And if you guys would like the notes, I'm going to put a link in the comments below so that way you can type in your email. And we take notes on each chapter. So if you would like those notes, feel free to subscribe and we could send that to you. Also, we do have a YouTube channel that we're downloading all these videos to. So if you would like to go back to a book that we've already gone over, you could go back and find that there. So with that, we will see you guys tomorrow and have a wonderful day.